There's been this internet-wide discussion surrounding video essays that has seemingly grown more prevalent in recent times. While most of us can say we love a good video essay, there's a growing vocal minority that seems to have issues with them. And naturally, as video essays continue to become more popular and controversial, so do video essays on video essays. Like the one from Pinely, where he talked about video essays and how SunnyV2 has ruined them. SunnyV2 is one of the most successful video essayists on the platform, and that is despite his videos being formulaic and surface deep and in some cases just plain stupid. He has the tendency to make normal downtrends in other YouTubers' careers out as some kind of scandal in the title and thumbnail, only to come to some nonsensical and mundane conclusion that leaves you unsatisfied. And of course there's his particularly callous and borderline transphobic video on Chris Tyson, which was so controversial, it's arguably what started this whole conversation about video essays in the first place. The guy is essentially the McDonald's or Macca's of video essays, being super consistent and successful, with easy to digest content that's more focused on marketability rather than the actual product itself, which, I mean, it works, it's a valid way of doing YouTube and it has obviously worked out for him, but it leads to a very soulless corporate feeling that, as Pinely puts it, lacks any kind of human empathy. And I tend to agree, right? I couldn't really care less about SunnyV2 as a content creator, and I think he's a bit bland, and there are plenty of other YouTubers I'd rather watch. But is he really ruining the entire video essay genre as a whole? No. No, he's not. Something a lot of people seem to forget is that not too long ago, SunnyV2 was a great YouTuber. Legitimately, unironically great. Wouldn't pin him as one of the best in the genre, but his old content at least felt like content, with actual effort and heart and thought put into it, right? His video on Minecraft nostalgia is solid. His video on gaming YouTubers is spot on, coming from a former one myself. There is a reason why SunnyV2 got so popular in the first place, and it's because his old content was generally pretty good and lively. You could hear it in his voice. He sounded less like a posh, impartial bore and more like a human. Like in his Fortnite video, despite it obviously being a bit derivative and dated, it was legitimately one of his best videos, right? It sounded like he was actually having fun. And it wasn't like this style of content wasn't successful or anything. He was getting millions of views a month from the very beginning, all the way back in 2020. Obviously nothing on the tens of millions he would get in 2022 onward, but it's still something many of us would kill for. But even if his content was never good and he was always mediocre, I still wouldn't understand how him just doing his thing is really hurting anyone, at least in the context of YouTube. I mean, I understand the concern with SunnyV2 clones who just copy his style down to his impartial, soulless narration, and I can definitely see how it would be annoying to see so many of these people, but even then, trying to say SunnyV2 is ruining video essays because of his clones is like saying Minecraft is ruining indie gaming because of its clones, right? It doesn't make any sense. You never blamed Mr. Beast himself on the Mr. Beastification of YouTube even after criticizing his style of content. What's so different now, right? Pinely never really explains how SunnyV2 and all the other channels he covered are actively ruining video essays as a whole. And what even are video essays anyways? Seriously, what is a video essay? Does anyone even know? Because I feel like all these people who talk about video essays don't really do a good job at differentiating them from other genres like commentary or reviews or top 10s. In fact, you could argue sometimes that those are just different forms of video essays. I mean, at this point you can even argue that people like AVGN or even Dagpods are video essayists, which I'll admit that's kind of a stretch, but that just goes to show how broad the term video essay really is. When you think about regular paper essays, you probably think about school papers or college theses or something like that. They're pretty much explicitly expository, almost never allowing any kind of personal opinion or argument, not even mentioning how bogged down they are by the very strict formatting and structure standards, which are there solely to make each essay feel the same so that they're easier to grade. Alright, school essays aren't fun, and I'd argue they have probably ruined essays in general for many people. But these academic essays are far from the only kind of essay out there, many of which aren't always held back by formatting standards or prompts or 5 paragraphs. And considering the actual definition of the word essay is simply just a short piece of writing on a particular subject, you can begin to see just how vague that term really is. Like even the Wikipedia page for the word essay states that there's a ton of overlap between essays and many different types of literature. And that same issue kind of translates to the video form of essays, which if we're to consider them as videos on a particular subject, that's a huge net to cast, right? That's a ton of content that SunnyV2 is supposedly ruining.
A video essayist can just be some person with a take, and potentially a good and profound one.
Finally states that it's something called an aesthetic of intellect that sets video essays apart, but he really only mentions this to transition into talking about SunnyV2. And per my own experience, this aesthetic of intellect, or tendency to be pretentious and pseudo-intellectual, isn't as pervasive of an issue as many people seem to think. Like many of the actual good and successful video essayists are able to make these hour-long video essays on things you've never really given a second thought to, and yet are still able to stay humble and respect their audience, thus being able to effectively change the way you think about things. For example, one of my personal favorite video essays is YMS's video on Kimba the White Lion. Now if Kimba rings a bell, you might be thinking of Simba from The Lion King. And well, that's because The Lion King, the Disney movie, supposedly copied Kimba the White Lion, which, hell of a claim to make, and one that has been parroted by a whole bunch of media outlets, YouTubers, and random, X users. And hearing it from all these supposed reputable sources, you probably believed it at one point, except it's not true. Like, at all.
You have been lied to.
The Lion King never plagiarized Kimba the White Lion.
You have been lied to.
And there's plenty of evidence exonerating the Lion King. Like 2.5 hours worth of evidence, which Adam uses to completely and utterly demolish any potential myth and argument that could ever be possibly made in favor of Kimba the White Lion. And while the guy comes super close to completely losing his mind multiple times,
and people watch this shit and they don't do their research, this is the 1997 film! Again!
He never really comes off as pretentious or holier than thou. He's literally only doing this because he stumbled upon this circle jerk of a conspiracy as part of his research for a completely different video on The Lion King 2019, that being the live-action Disney remake. And it drove him so mad that he decided to go to extreme lengths to put this rumor away once and for all so that he'd never have to think about it again. And the result is this brilliant work of art. Yeah, it is a bit older, it came out in 2020 before SunnyV2 blew up, but video essays of this quality still keep popping up to this day, many of which Pinely has mentioned himself. Defunctland's video on the Disney Channel theme came out less than a year ago, at what could arguably be considered SunnyV2's prime, and YouTubers like Chef Realist and Nexpo and Amp Lemon and Barely Sociable and Bobby Broccoli, they're all still very much relevant and successful. All of this despite SunnyV2 being mid. At the end of the day, the thing about video essays is that they are infinitely malleable. You can make one on any length to talk about anything, and incorporate any kind of style you want. And the ultimate appeal of video essays is that the very best of them can potentially change the world in ways that many other YouTubers can only dream of. And besides, if I was still in school and had to choose between a paper and a video essay, I think I know which one I'd rather do.